Hey everyone, well, day after the election, or what was supposed to be the day after the election, it seems like it's going to be never ending, but I'm just sitting here staring out the window thinking about a lot of things, and there are things that I think you're thinking about too. I'm thinking about masks, this pandemic, the quarantines, and when mask wearing started to become mandated, I found myself really struggling. And first masks were not effective, right? We were told not to go out and buy them. And then we're told that they are effective. And then we hear everything in between. And you can find any opinion you could ever want on the internet. And so I just, I felt like I didn't know what to believe. I think a lot of us have felt very confused on what is real out there, what's really going on, especially living in rural areas like I do, where it hasn't been as much of an explosion as some of the cities. And so if I'm honest, for a while, I did feel like it was a political gag, that it was more of a muzzle. And as I started to pray about all of this, I just started asking questions that I've never asked before. Questions like, okay, God, is it okay to be patriotic? Is it okay to fight for my civil liberties? Is it okay to fight for my religious liberties? Surely I know to not fight for them is to lose them. And over the past couple months, I've been reminded in a million different ways that we do live in unprecedented times. That word has become a cliche, but I don't think we recognize that we live in unprecedented times of things like comfort and luxury and safety. And when I think about being mandated to wear a mask, being mandated to do anything daily, my mind does what a lot of people's probably do. I think it's an easy jump from mandated masks to mandated vaccines to a mandated chip in my arm to make sure that I'm up to date on vaccines, and then I have to use it to buy my coffee. It's like a sci-fi thriller. And I look around and it seems like the socialist train has left the station and it ain't turning back. And if that's the case, that's a scary destination for our country. Just ask a Cuban American. And that's when I started to observe a few different kinds of fear working in our culture right now. And if we stick to just the pandemic alone, I see two clear types of fear. Primarily, if we're real, on the political left, we see a fear of the virus. This virus is going to take my physical life. And then a lot, primarily on the political right, we see fear of government overreach. They are going to take life as I know it. And as I pray about this, I realize God just has kind of been revealing to me that both of these are just rumble strips on each side of the highway, reminding us to get back in our lane, to get back into the center of God's love, into fear and awe of a mighty God. And First John tells us that there is no fear in love. And so if I'm living in fear, then I am not living in God's love. And further, if we're honest, what does comfort and luxury and safety actually cause in the church? They cause atrophy. They cause apathy and laziness. They cause a weakened body. That's what we're seeing right now in our country. And, I watched this amazing documentary. It's called Sheep Among Wolves, Volume 2. It's on YouTube. And if you haven't seen it, go look it up right now. It is amazing. And it talks about the church in Iran. There is an explosion of Muslims coming to know Jesus like never before. This is a church that's primarily led by women. These women are having to have conversations with their husbands and their families about what they want them to do should they get caught, or I should say when they get caught, because if they get caught sharing Jesus and how Jesus has transformed their hearts and their lives, they will be brutally raped, beaten, and murdered. And so with their family, they're having to prepare for that inevitability. While we sit over here in our comfort and luxury and safety, completely backbiting and attacking each other. And I'm just talking within the church. And in this documentary, it states something I had never thought about, but is so true. He says, in the West, you primarily convert to disciple. And I would add, suck at discipling. But over here, he says, we disciple to convert. Because he says a convert will run away from persecution, whereas a disciple will run into it. And so when I think about heading towards socialism, when I think about losing my religious liberties, I start to realize, wait a minute, maybe that's not the threat I thought it was. Maybe there's a bigger story unfolding before our eyes. Maybe persecution is exactly what this church needs to wake up and to finally come alive as the bride of Christ. And there's a story in the documentary that perfectly encapsulates this this idea. It's a story of a Syrian couple who, because of religious persecution, they come over to the United States of America. And after a few months, the wife looks at her husband and says, "We have to go back. We cannot stay here." And he says, "Go back? What do you mean go back to that persecution? When we can live in safety and comfort here in the United States?" And she said, "No, there is a satanic lullaby in the West that is causing the church to be sleepy, to fall asleep." And she said, "I am feeling sleepy. We have to go back." Isn't it something that the comfort and luxury and safety of the West is a greater threat? She deems it a greater threat to her faith than the actual persecution happening back in Syria. That says a lot. And, as I think about these masks, it may or may not stop the virus. I don't know. I can find 100 different studies and articles claiming 100 different levels of efficacy. And there's one thing I know for certain, though, that a mask will never stop the ability of God's people to worship Him in any and every circumstance. We have an invitation right now. And whether or not to wear a mask, how long you go along to get along before saying this far and no more, that's between you and the Spirit of God living in you. But remember, church, that freedom is not being free of hardship and suffering and pain and oppression. Freedom is letting God set us free in our spirits while walking through hardship and suffering and pain and oppression and someday, yes, actual persecution, which we have not yet suffered. We have no idea what actual persecution looks like here in the West. But while we're worrying about the political gag on our face, I think we're ignoring the spiritual gag that's on our hearts. And how is this election and the rest of the elections in my lifetime going to shake out? I have no idea. But what I do know is that we cannot lose. Do you guys get this? We can't lose. We can lose comfort. We can lose safety or security. We can lose luxury. But we cannot lose the peace that passes all understanding. We cannot lose it unless we choose to give it away. And church, we are choosing to give it away. And I want to leave you with this metaphor. It's from Ted Decker's The Forgotten Way. If you don't have this book, you should run to Amazon and get it right now because it's amazing. This truth has set me free. And I think it could do the same for you. He says, imagine for a moment that you are a child standing on a wide beach with brilliant white sand. And on the beach, you get to build sandcastles, either alone or with your friends. Big ones and small ones, really tricky ones that are super elaborate and take many days or weeks to build. One of the sandcastles is large enough for you to live in, like a fort. And so you build sandcastles with great enthusiasm, fully aware that at any moment a big wind or wave will wipe out some or all of your sandcastles. But this does not worry you, because you will just build another one. Either way, your stay at the beach will one day be over and you will leave it. But for now, you jump around with delight and play and build. Why? Because that's why you are here, to build sandcastles, and you love it. How beautiful are those sandcastles that reflect your Father's creative intent? Do you ever mistake yourself for the sand and cringe at the prospect of being wiped out by a wave? If you do, you will suffer with the crumbling of that sand. But that isn't who you are. You are the boy or the girl on the beach, enjoying and using the sand. You are neither the sand itself nor the sand castle you live in, which is temporary and soon will wash away. Here's the kicker, you guys. You are playing in the sand, but you are not of it. In the same way, you are in the world, but you are not of it. He goes on to say that most think they are the sand, and so cringe in fear when the wind blows, or this is the kicker, or they wage a war of words and weapons against any who come to threaten their sandcastle. Thus they suffer. In the same way, there are two dimensions at hand, and your experience in this life is dictated by the dimension you identify with as your primary reality. Here's what the church has wrong. We see heaven as part of this timeline as a destination that I will someday get to. But here's the deal. Heaven is the presence of God, and God lives outside of time and space. He has given us time and space to make sense of our lives on earth. We have hours in the day, days to the week, weeks to the month, and months to the year, so that we can make sense of our lives. But He lives outside of time. And so here's the thing about eternity, about heaven, about eternal life with God. It is not the elongation of time. It is the actual absence of time itself. That makes it a dimension and a reality that exists right now. Did you get that? I can either choose to see through my human eyes and to live in this reality, Democrats and Republicans, black and white, right and wrong, bad and good, this world of polarity that I see with my eyes, or I can choose to, through prayer, through surrender, to see through the eyes of Christ, to trade in my blindness for sight, and to live in the heavenly realm here and now, the dimension that exists outside of time. I can literally experience heaven, experience Jesus right now. So he ends with, to the extent you think you're the sand or the sand castles you build. What are some of those sand castles? Your relationships, wealth, pleasures, enemies, houses, cars, clothing, religion. I would add political party or candidate. To the extent that you think you are those things, you will be filled with anxiety when the wind and waves and 2020 come. To the extent you're aware that you're the son or daughter of the Father on the beach for the express purpose of building sandcastles, you will build them with pleasure. The beach is stunning and a wonderful gift, but never mistake yourself for any earthen vessel that will soon return to dust in this life. You have the pleasure of building these sandcastles with your Father, but that's not who you are. And at the end of the day, you will go home with Abba Father, with our Papa God. Don't be duped, you guys. Don't be duped into thinking that you are one political party or the other. You are not. And today, I just want us to think about an important question. Do I care more about being right? Do I care more about being safe, about being comfortable, about protecting the luxuries in my life? Or do I care about every single person, especially those that I would label my enemy? Do I care that every single person would have every opportunity to come to know the love of Christ that has supposedly set me free? Galatians says it is for freedom that we have been set free. And so I call the church today to actually walk in that freedom, to remember who you are. Because like Bob Goff says, true love doesn't tell someone what to do. It reminds them who they are. And as I ask God, wait, how do I help people remember who they are without telling them what to do? Because I darn well know what they should do. He reminded me, Nicole, only by remembering who you are and then being that. So my prayer today is that you would remember who you are as the son or daughter of Christ, and you would be that, and that will absolutely transform you and transform every single person around you. I love you guys. God bless. Have a great day.